Live now. Okay. Look. There we go.
What's the weather like where you are?
Oh, in Los Angeles, it's always enviable. Okay, so I'm just going to copy this over. So, all right, so here we are. Alice is new to the group today. Susan's here. Jeffrey's here. We'll see who else pops in. I messaged to over to Verena to see if she might be able to jump in today. And so we are still learning to pivot, right? Your homework, if you chose to accept, was to try to write a piece about something that shaped your experience as a teacher or even as a student that allowed you to see how school could be different from the standard and sort of a glimpse into what is possible in school. Or if you wanted to write sort of an imaginary fable like anecdote parable type thing, to try to imagine school in a new way. That's what we were that's what we were looking for. So I wrote something, Jeffrey wrote something, Susan swears she wrote something, uh,
Yeah.
and Alice, I don't know if you saw that prompt, but we could talk, even if you didn't write anything. We could still just try to figure out a couple ideas of what you're thinking about in terms of what you would like to do to remake school and rethink school.
Okay.
So, let's see. So Jeffrey, you posted a link in the chat. All right, cool. And I'll do the same, just so everyone can see what I put together. Okay. All right. There we go. So, and the idea here was to, just so we kind of back up, show the process a little bit here, was to, after all the talk, try to set things down to paper and get some thoughts out from our individual perspectives, and then try to cull from and harvest ideas, and maybe together publish something that could be a thought paper, a learning to pivot group effort trying to promote for educators, written by educators for educators, to think about some of the ways that we might try to help um, rethink what it is that we ought to be doing in school, either pre-corona or during corona or post-corona. It doesn't really matter at this point. These are probably all good ideas. So, all right, I'm taking a look over at your piece, Jeffrey. um, Tell us what are you not happy about with this piece? So you said you weren't exactly pleased with how it came out. What do you mean?
Um, it just seems like ranting at this point. It seems like, oh my God, what am I going to do?
Hmm.
So I'm not, and it's not pithy. Uh, it's longer than I want it to be.
Gotcha.
Like when I read something, I want it to have I want it to be like poetry. I want to get rid of
Hmm.
all the words that are unnecessary. So and I want to have a core idea behind there, and I think I got it,
Hmm.
where I said Maslow before Bloom, right?
Got
Um,
it.
that
Right.
there's no way that we're going to be able to do any of this unless we take care of the basic needs. So whoever shows up, we're going to have to say, "How you doing?" And then
Hmm.
we're not going to be able to teach them anything until we take care of those basic needs. Now that doesn't
Hmm.
mean that everybody uh, is going to have that stress, because some of them aren't. Some of them are just oblivious and go, "Oh my gosh, all of
Hmm.
this stuff was happening, and I didn't notice at all." Um, and
Hmm.
that might be the Corona stuff, but it also might be um, it also might be the stuff about race relations, and about,
Mhm.
I mean, that's huge, because I mean, take away the coronavirus, take away the virus completely, and we've
Right.
still got a boatload of stuff to deal with.
Yeah.
And then take away all of that, and we've still got the virus stuff. And as I
Mhm.
said in the uh, as I said or alluded to this, I think I'm in my own little bubble, that, I'm following, I'm a rule follower. I just, somebody tells me to do something and I go, okay, well, I'll go do that.
Mhm.
And there are times that I'll go and question things. However, I'll never get to the point where I don't trust the science, right?
Right.
Or I don't trust somebody who has more education or more experience than I do. So, I'm going to expect that. But I've had at least 2 or 3 direct conversations with people this week that have opened my eyes to the fact that no, not everybody thinks the same way that I do. And it's like walking to a store, and my gosh, there are lines on the floor. Stay away! Stop reaching in front of me! And it's just, I wasn't in there for very long, and I thought, okay, this is an environment I really can't control. Now, when I get to school, I'm going to be surrounded by kids whose job it is to press against the adults. And to test the ideas under even normal circumstances. They're going to test those ideas. So, and then Beijing closed today. They closed
Yeah.
their schools today. South Korea's already closed some schools. And these are places where there's a high degree of compliance. They ask you to do something, and people are complying. Whereas, I went, my term this week is doom scrolling, where
Mm.
you're going through and you're getting
Mhm.
into this well of this pit of despair,
Mhm.
of the people who are saying things like, oh, if you're wearing an N95 mask, then it cuts off up to 60% of the oxygen, and so you can't breathe. It's like, hang on, like, who told you this? Because if that were true, doctors would be passing out and nurses would be passing out all the time, and yet it's something that's put out there, and it just takes so much of my oxygen to refute that. And so, I get it when I'm talking to 13 and 14-year-olds. It's like, okay, yeah, you've heard that,
Right.
clearly,
Right.
no, this is not true, and let's work through this. But then it just seems that uh, the disenfranchised have found their voice, and it's in the YouTube comments, and it's in the Twitter comments, and it's just, and there are some things that are just posted out there just to watch the world burn. So, so anyway, so
Mm.
that's what I tried. As I was writing this,
Yeah.
I was getting paralyzed, absolutely paralyzed. So I wrote this at 3:30 today, and that's why I'm not happy with it. So that's
I
your
think
too
it's
long to
a
get free.
it's no,
Not
that's
happy.
great. I think it's a really good first draft, and I like actually all your talk behind it. I think that's really helpful, because I think that there's a significant amount of daily fear and anxiety, and then the rule following. Boy, oh boy, you know, um, I'd say you're right for the most part that teachers, either by design or because of their role in the classroom, tend to fall in line a bit more. And there is, I think any one of us could look out the window and or go to a store, or drive by a restaurant and see, like, what rules? Doesn't look like anyone has read them, or if they have, they're just ignoring them. And just, I mean, things are opening up here in Los Angeles County, and I just read today that over half of the restaurants that are open are violating the rules.
Yeah.
Have to, so everything has to be reassessed and reactivated, and meanwhile, yeah, things are closing again.
Well,
Um,
one of the one thing I didn't put in there, what was sort of percolating in my head, and I was trying to find a way to put it. I teach middle schoolers, and somebody said, what they're going to do? You're going to get kids who will start trading masks as a sign that they're dating. And And
Oh,
I thought, oh my God,
that's interesting.
it's
I never thought about that.
it's the 2020 version of getting pinned in the
It's
fifth.
getting pinned. Oh my God, that's crazy.
And I just,
Wow.
I'm letting the, like, last year I'm letting the kids into the classroom, and they're jostling in the line and stuff. And then as one line goes past the other, you have these kids who are dating, and they hug and they kiss, and they're like, okay, kids, like, stop it, just get to your class, right? And my stress is going up like this, and that's under a normal circumstance. And I'm thinking, what happens if I look down and I see a kid and she's wearing a mask and it's got her boyfriend's name or girlfriend's name on the front of it or something, and I'm going, oh. So I'm not
Uh,
sleeping well at all.
that's amazing. I had not even considered the 2020 Corona getting pinned via trading masks. That's you're probably right. I think, and if they hadn't thought about it, hopefully someone's listening. They'll start doing it now. Um, just kidding. Don't do that. Daniel's here. Gary's here. Ehor's here. Hello, people. I'm going to post the two written pieces that are published so far for today's talk. And if you have one that I bet Gary can share something. Gary likes to write. So, and Susan, if you have something written somewhere you want to give me a link, I'll give it to everybody. Sorry, I can't hear you.
I'm gonna unmute. Yeah, when I get it together, it's
Okay.
piecemealed right now. So when I
Even
get,
in rough draft form is cool. Just
yeah,
get the
okay. Well,
thoughts out there.
I'll throw you my rough draft
Okay.
form. Um,
Cool.
yeah, you know what? I think why it's so difficult to put together is because there are so many unknowns, and the if we're looking at the best possible, there's so many things to consider that it's hard to
Right.
formulate what you might think might be in the best interest or what might work best. I do know that for me, I always come at it from a lens of the social emotional piece uh, rather than the academic piece. And how can we embed the social emotional piece in whatever we're doing, whether we're back fully, whether we're back partially, whether we're blended, all the possible scenarios.
Hmm.
I think one thing that I left out of what I wrote that I think is vital, but I don't know exactly how I would formulate it, is the well-being of staff should be a real priority. And it's not just all about the students, although we're always student-centered and we're always student-focused. I think in our formulation of what the best could be, we have to ourselves maybe think about and be empathetic about not just the kids, but the adults who are coming back to the building, whether it's partially or fully, or will be out for whatever reason. I know here what they're doing is they just as something that they've considered or they're going to do is having one sub for every building. So if you were substituting all over the district, you are no longer doing that. You are assigned to one building. And the reason that they're doing that is multiple reasons, but it's considering the well-being of the people that are in that building. But what does that look like? We're anticipating that adults will possibly be off for whatever reasons. And so I think I know I want to consider all of that in my writing. It's not just about the kids, it's about the well-being of all, me included. If I'm I will be officially retired again in September, but that doesn't mean I won't be back, because I'm guessing I will be back for whatever reasons. And so anyway, it's something that it's a lot to think about. And because I'm focused now on finishing, our school year doesn't finish till the very end of June, the very last day in June. I am busily doing what needs to be done to wind up the year. And so thinking about what, even though there's discussions about what next year will look like, and I certainly, when I'm reading about what other people say, it's focused more on the academics than that social emotional piece, even though
Right.
people are thinking about that social emotional piece.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Anyway, that's
Yeah, yeah, and then that ties into what Jeffrey's trying to handle too, just like where I guess I would frame it as, is there room to talk about how to structure things in an academic way if we haven't really figured out some sort of plan that people can wrap their head around and think about in advance, far in advance, like this is how it works and this is what it looks like. I haven't seen a single plan that looks like it completely makes sense and that everyone will be able to stay safe and be on campus. I haven't seen one. So if you've seen one, share it. Or if you have one tucked away in your head, maybe you should, you probably get consulting gigs all over the world right now. Because yeah, that is a major concern. I mean, just like, and I was trying to think about it this morning, like what other building is open right now where people stay inside for so many hours talking. And I can't, what, a hospital? I
Hospital.
guess. That's right. That's about it. Like I don't think there's another building that's currently doing what the school is trying to do. So, all right, there's Susan's link.
With what Susan was talking about, just taking care of the the mental health first. My experience has been that we've been talking about this over and over again since the school has been let out. So we got let out March 12th, and we've been teaching online ever since. And every single thing that's coming down from the board is mental health, take care of this, just watch this. Like it's all super supportive. And then the rubber met the road and we had to write report cards. And
Right.
and I wrote the report card, and it was basically, yeah, glad that they're safe. There's some evidence, but seriously, we'll have to pick this up in September. And got the reply, no, you got to give more detail than that. It's like, no, I don't. It's difficult. So I think that the kids that opted out, some of them had adequate mental health reasons for that, and some of them didn't. And there's this feeling that if you were capable of doing this, then you should go and do this. And and everybody's been judged by that standard, right? It's like, you know what, that one's going to slip through the cracks, and we should be okay with that, right? So because we just want them to, we want them to show up in September or later, fully whole.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And then I see a couple other things in the chat here. People are posting their links, so that's good. So let's do this little by little. I've never run a live Zoom meeting with a bunch of educators all posting their blog posts at once here in the chat. So let's just figure this out together. So I see the thread that Susan, I think I need access to your document, so maybe you need to change the view access on it. But the thread here about keeping people safe and having them just feel comfortable is really clear, and there's no there's no great solution there. But I'm also interested in some of the other ideas that are in here. So Jeffrey, going back to yours, your in terms of just like the nuts and bolts of what you'd think school can look like, other than like an AB kind of concept, things like that. What do you think school ought to do? Like, what do you think classes can actually achieve? Let's imagine that we can make everyone safe. What is it that we're doing in your vision, in your version of school?
Reduced content, project-based learning, collaborative projects between math and science, give the kids the projects, have them go away, come back, do that. Social projects that integrate with history and all the social sciences and language. And so I think that everything kind of has to do double duty, and that might mean that the science teacher and the math teacher get together and they do a lesson together with a large group, and then they go away. So the nuts and bolts of it is that if you're going to do that, you have to do less curriculum. You have to be okay with that. You have to understand that there's going to be some overlap, and that that in the Ontario system, we have what are called we have strands. So in mathematics, there are 5 strands, and in English, there are 4 strands, in French, etc. Each of the strands has a general expectation and a specific expectation. The general expectations you might have, say, 5 expectations for reading and 4 for writing, and then there are like 28 for each one of those things, and those are the specifics. So when we're doing that, we're supposed to use the specifics to guide it, but comment on the general. And I think we have to pare down to just general, right? Because the specifics are meant to isolate the subject, and we have to expand so that one thing in language can do something else in other things, and we have to be okay with not closing our doors. That we have to be able to communicate with another teacher for that. So, and I don't know what, and that's just Ontario, right? So, but whatever is posted for Ontario, it's all of Ontario. It's not isolated to a single board. It's general for everything. So if our Ministry of Education decides, all right, everybody, we're not going to have 5 math strands, we're going to have 1. It's going to be patterning and algebra, because you can do patterns in every single strand, and we can do algebraic growth or
Right.
in every single strand. So it's just going to be, here's your 1 strand, and tell me what you've learned.
Interesting. I always I just want to put this out there to see if it goes somewhere. I've always been curious, like, why is the focus to look at the strands and standards, benchmarks, and then develop activities and lessons from that point? Why not see what's happening in the classroom with the kids, and then the teacher is the one, or a group of teachers, say, amongst themselves, say, hey, guess what? We're doing strand 27 and nobody knows. Like, why aren't the teachers attaching what's happening organically to something that is an inorganic way of approaching school, if it's so important that we have these kinds of standards and strands anyhow? Like, I just never understood that.
Well, I can tell you some of the growth of that. The Ontario report card system was developed primarily first when it was overhauled in the 70s, 80s. It was primarily overhauled by the math department. And because the math department came and they said, okay, so these are the strands and we can measure this, it became a model for everything else. And so once that was set down, it meant that language had to do the same thing and French had to do the same thing. And so did science. So it was a case of sort of first in the door, and it was easy to measure. So
right, exactly, yeah. The problem of having the electronic grade book is that we put administrators on we gave them too many eyes on what was happening, so they could measure it, right? Crank out the data. So Interesting. I like what you're saying. Now I'm popping over to Susan's piece. Hopefully, everyone in the chat here or in the
Just
room here
wanted
has got
to
the
point out
links.
that all this was decided in 1895. The
You're
Committee
right.
of 10, under the president of Harvard University, decided to have the way we do things today, you know, with different strands and so on and so forth, was dictated over 100 years ago, and it continues to molest our children to this day.
Yeah. 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 It's ridiculous. It doesn't. I've never actually read a standards book and thought, "Wow, I now have all these great things I'm going to do tomorrow." Always read them and like sat around with a bunch of admin and teachers and said, "Okay, so we do this, we do this, we do this, we do this. Is this meeting over now? Like, what are we doing? Like, why are we reading this big fat book?" Um,
Oh that it's based on, first of all, the idea of providing, delivering a uniform educational experience, of covering some curriculum. Now, with every iteration, any group that gets their hands into it rests power in their ability to double the volume of the work.
mhm.
I can't remember, one of the Canadian provinces, I looked at their ed tech standards once, and it had everything from cleaning up a toxic spill to to saving a file. That
Alberta.
that the way that they're for real. I mean, it was
No, it was Alberta. Mhm.
so you get the committees involved, and the way that they have some ownership over this is by adding their stuff. Nothing's ever subtracted. And in fact, I'm
Right.
now thinking of it's unfortunate that I didn't ask Debbie Meyer the other night about standards,
Mhm.
because it's another thing like small schools that when she and Ted Sizer were talking about them, they didn't recognize how it was going to be weaponized in a bad way. But they're profoundly undemocratic, and you'd think that Republicans would hate them. But they don't, and it's largely because, from a public policy perspective, I keep coming back to this, and no one likes it when I say it, 0% of the public cares about education policy.
I'm learning that. I'm still holding on to, come on, but yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah. So you can couch it easily as equity, right? We're
Mhm.
ensuring that all kids get the same Algebra 2 content as any other kid, that it's not dependent on your zip code, and so
Right.
it's the world's easiest sale. I mean, I love, and people just suspend their disbelief in these discussions.
Mhm.
They literally say in almost any description of the Common Core standards in the US, they say created by the nation's governors. I'd love to see Chris Christie's minutes from the meeting. This is such patent bullshit. This is
Yeah.
such obvious nonsense. And
Yeah.
everyone just nods. Yeah,
Yeah.
sure, the governors were working on educational standards, which, by the way, never even had force of law, and yet educators swallowed them hook, line, and sinker, which is another part of the problem.
That is interesting.
Which is that educators just went, yo, okay. As soon as you bought them lunch and they went to a workshop, they were invested in making, finding the good in the
That's right.
standards.
Yeah, Panera for everybody.
Yeah, you're right. Right. Yeah, it doesn't take much. And it was amazing, and they were very smart. I mean, if you want to force something through schools, make sure you get a lot of PD in quickly. Get everyone to attend 2 hours of something.
Mm-hmm.
And it's this weird quirk in teacher nature, I won't even say human nature, to be good soldiers and say, well, we went to the workshop, surely there's got to be something good in this. It's for us to find out what the good part is.
Right.
The Common Core standards are not the law anywhere in the United States. And
That's so fascinating.
And yeah, everyone just sort of went along. It's like the world's easiest war. Everyone surrendered with the press release. and then folks start making money on it, right?
That's great. I think I'm feeling a Gary blog post coming on. The world's
Yeah.
easiest war. I like that one.
Yeah, well, okay, I'll write it down.
That's a good one. Well, okay, so I'm going to pop over to Susan's document now. I think a bunch of you are on it now. So, Susan, you talked a little bit about what you were trying to think about from your seat in the counseling department or whatever you call it, from a psychological standpoint, like what kinds of things we need to think about here. And I think that I imagine you're working on this too, although this is probably more focused on students right now, this document, right? But what are the kinds of things you're thinking that teachers might need to, or any staff or faculty need to be focused on, or perhaps tweak or rethink or add to what they're doing now?
Well, I'd have to really, really contemplate that. This was a super, super rough draft. It was just thinking,
No,
okay,
that's okay.
what should they acknowledge? But I am definitely thinking here. I pivoted in a month ago, and last week when I was on, I was the most tired I have been in a long time. So I came in really, really fresh. I'd say fresh in that I felt I had all day to take care of myself, do fun things. I was retired at the time, and I was doing everything I wanted to do, and pivoted in and realized how how emotionally draining it can be. As much as I love kids and I love connecting and I love collaborating with staff and I like all of those things, and parents, I think I've dealt more with parents during this period than any other period in time, because of being pivoting in. So I think it's how are staff going to take care of themselves while being super empathetic towards other people. And I mean super empathetic, because as much as we may believe or thought that we thought, oh, this person has this to deal with at home, this person has that to deal with at home. Well, they did in the past, but having to be an educator plus have all of those things be permanently in your space impacts people in ways that I know that we haven't predicted in the past. And we don't know how. There's no research, there's no understanding of the long-term impacts. Again, I'm thinking some people will come out as better people, just like kids will, as a result of this. And some people, it will affect them for a while to come. And how are they going to be impacted? Fortunately, they will have had a break, but what kind of break? The break's not going to be the same, because I know here as across the world, people are preparing for all three scenarios. They're preparing for back full-time, back part-time, and fully online. So educators have never done that in the past. How are they going to be? And how are we going to be way more supportive of each other than we've ever been, because of maybe we don't know what they've had to cope with in the last little while. Those are things I think about, but how will that manifest
Yeah.
itself? I'm not sure.
Yeah. it's true. It used to be fun to plan for the fall. Now it's like, oh my God, it's hard to even see the fall. Yeah, strange, very strange. Um, yeah, I think I'm just looking over your document here a bit more. Yeah, virtual comp space. That's an interesting idea. What do you mean by that? How would that work for students or anybody?
Well, here at the high school that I'm at, we had created a comm space for students, so like an in-school comm space. And
Right.
so I did create, I'll give you the link when I'm off here, but I created 2 virtual spaces for students to go to. We have a school space that, we want to help students just to be calm in a breathing space. We called it the breathing room, a place to breathe, a place to kind of escape when things were just too much stress. So I did create a couple virtual ones, and I'll share the link with you on that.
Interesting. That's cool. I think that's going to be an important new feature. I was always impressed when schools even had something like that for kids to disappear into and just gather themselves. I think that's great. Um, Trying to figure out what else. Anyone else have anything they want to share about looking at Susan's document? Although she admits it's in rough form, it's okay. Everything, and it's actually cool to see rough form. I actually enjoy that. Watch the process. So this is striking me. Okay, I'll just keep talking. No one else. Teach skills and validation. What do you mean by that? I'm interested in that concept, Susan. Can you maybe explain a little bit more?
I'm trying to do 2 things at once here.
Idea.
I'm trying to go to my virtual
Okay.
calm space.
It's on your third page. The teach skills and validation. What do you mean? What are you going for there?
Yeah, let me. I'm not sure what I was going for there, but I'm guessing helping them validate their experiences, whatever. I think I'd have to look at what I was thinking there. I probably just wrote some ideas, but validating what's happening for them, how this has impacted them, and how it's impacted their learning. And from listening to kids, I'd say a multitude of kids, and for their different experiences, they all experience this very differently. And
Yeah.
and we need to validate all of those, whether it's a child with severe special needs and how they've coped, and they could cope positively, or there may have been lots of impediments to their learning from a student who this was, I've heard kids say that this was fun at the beginning. They thought it was fun. It was great. I'm at home, I'm learning, this is a really good time. And no longer is it's not fun anymore. And even though their teachers may be trying to make it as positive and as a good experience for them as possible, their learning was impacted in a way that they didn't expect. So I think that's where I was going, that, self-validation, that it's okay. I may do really well, but the person next to me who was just as, they were impacted very differently. I think about the kid who I had a grade 12 student who he shut down completely at the beginning of COVID. And the good news is that when I connected with him, he would say everything turned around. Now, there's a multitude of reasons for that, but whatever those reasons are, things turned around where he didn't think he could graduate to where he could graduate. And some students who maybe thought they were going to graduate and struggled way more than they did. But I found educators to be super, super compassionate at this time. And so a student that was really, really struggling and didn't believe that they would graduate, I got news today that he's done. He's done it. And so I think the validation is that it happens differently for everybody. And we need to just understand that.
Yeah, no, that's helpful. I get what you're saying now. And I think, it's already common practice to look at a room full of students and say, okay, well, I everyone's got a different learning path, and they're here, they're here in the same real moment, but they're on different points in their path, right? And now there's a whole new section of trying to figure out, okay, so how did any of this affect you, and being out of school, and you're right, some kids probably thrived and others, felt like it was a big miss for them. So we have to figure out what we're going to do there, or if we're going to do anything at all there, or just add it to another one of the ways that we try to check in and see what we can do to help. Yeah, so
I like your
it's sort of
point
mind boggling.
I liked your point about speaking pattern or sleeping pattern, Susan. Just because I anticipate a lot of kids are going to be very surprised that they can't sleep into whenever they want. So, because in middle school, you always have one or two kids who show up, 10 o'clock, something like that, just because they can't get going through the day. I think that's going to be a much bigger problem for my school next year. Just because I know that when we're doing Google Meets and Zooms and stuff like that, we're doing all sorts of things, and we have to put the meetings to 2 o'clock or later because we know they're not going to be up. So.
Right. Yeah. No, I'm totally dysregulated. My entire family's dysregulated with sleep. Like, I honestly don't even know how I'm functioning sometimes. Like teaching at 8 o'clock and going to bed at 1:30 a.m. Like, I don't know what's going on. It's crazy. And so let's take a look. There are a couple more pieces here. So, Ihor, you've got a good head scratcher. I like it. Maybe you want to talk a little bit. Everyone see Ihor's link?
Well,
I'll post it here in the chat again.
Yeah,
I get what you're doing, but I want to hear you talk about it.
I knew that something that I just wrote was sort of crazy
That's great.
in terms of what you suggested, but there's a lot of commonality in what's going on in schools and what I'm writing about, because one of the people who are in mathematics understand this, mathematics education, I should say, understand the power that fractions have over young people today. In fact, I would call it a pandemic. It's not a killer, it's not killing them, but it kind of takes their soul away because they don't get it. It's one of the hardest things that one has to learn as a young child because there's so many rules, there's so many complications. And the problem is it's approached as if it's very simple and doable if you just follow the rules and do all this. Meanwhile, half the population is getting turned off to mathematics. By the time they get to middle school, they couldn't care less. The majority, at least half the kids. So I wanted to look at it as like, well, what would solve this if I had all my, all the chips on my side, and what would solve it is to do it in a style that young people would find interesting and entertaining. Okay. And so I said, first of all, it should be taught as a story. Okay. And I had a great inspiration from a story that was called The Weird Number. It was put out in 1970 by Xerox and one of the educational developers. And it was just, I had an opportunity to talk to the woman that was part of the grant and produced this 12-minute wonderful animated story of numbers that live in, actually the town is not identified, but they know that there's they're all whole numbers. They're called natural numbers, and they all live in this town. And one day there was a robbery, and it was really weird because these whole numbers didn't know anything about fractions. And so this fraction shows up and steals something. And the sheriff knows that everybody in town would only steal the amount of who they are. So like 3 would steal 3 objects, 10 would steal 10 objects. So here's somebody that stole a piece of an object. Confused the hell out of everybody. And so, you know, and the story goes on, and it's mesmerizing for kids almost at any age because it's so well developed. You know, and I stop and think when I come across that, and I say, why haven't the math world come up with ways that aren't about listing these objectives? And this is, the objective should be put on the bulletin board at the beginning of the day, or you get demerits from your administrator. And the exact opposite ought to be true. Do something interesting to start off the class. Have them work on it. And then at the end of the day, say, well, what did you learn today? Oh, yeah, that was my objective. You know?
Right.
So that's when you know it's a win-win situation. But it's just moronic that I've been involved with NCTM all my life, all my adult life. And I'll tell you, they all mean well. They're wonderful people, but they're misguided in a lot of ways because they really think that if you just dig hard enough and you struggle hard enough, kids will eventually learn it. And the level of learning has been flat for the last 50 years. And so anyway, this is kind of my opus to try to do that. I'm actually writing such a document, and hopefully I'll find some people interested that might want to review it and work on it with me. That's been a challenge for me.
I'm sure we can find some people.
That would be lovely.
Yeah, I love getting involved with things. So
Yes,
what? So this is really cool. So and I know you've mentioned this video before, and I actually I need to take the time to watch it.
Yeah.
I love this old stuff too. It's really
I got the link in there if you want to watch it.
Yeah, no, I see it. It's embedded.
You have to devote a whole 12 minutes. You know,
Okay, I think I could spare it. So then you're saying, and probably what you're always really saying is that the story itself is maybe the key to getting something happening that puts kids in a position where they care. But see, what do you deal with then? I mean, obviously, if it's ever teacher centered, it starts to smell to them a little bit, right? It starts to become a bit of a chore.
Yeah. I try because I spent a lot of time working with teachers in New Jersey, and I worked with students, usually 5th grade. I started as a high school teacher, and slowly over 35 years of working with teachers and students, I moved all the way down to 5th grade.
That's cool.
Where I thought it was more powerful, the learning was more powerful because the kids are still very engaged. They haven't lost it yet. And where was I going with that? What was the question you asked?
Well, just like my concern, which is something I'm always trying to work on in what I do, is where are the students' ideas instead of mine? Like, I know where I'd like them to potentially go, but if I make it too much of my narrative and not theirs, then I don't really hook them.
Right. So usually what I do is I just ask questions, just questions. So they immediately engaged, even if it doesn't make any sense to them why I'm asking. Like a kid says, well, what are you studying today? Well, we're doing some algebra. I said, so what is algebra? What is that all about? Well, it's about letters, or something like that. And, it's the intense study of the last 3 letters of the alphabet. That's what algebra is. So for me. And I stole that joke.
I like it.
So anyway, so the approach that you use with kids is more be a partner. Like what parents do with young children is they'll read to them at night, and the kids will like that. I know my nephew's son is like that. He hates school work, but he's engaged when he's, in the style or manner that he enjoys with his father and his mother. But And he does the schoolwork, but you know, it's distasteful. So
Right.
the trick is when they say what works shouldn't be necessarily what's research based in the math community, because you know they'll figure out whether you should use a decimal point or some other configuration and spend hours and days and weeks studying issues that are of no interest to kids. And so the challenge is to start with the kids' interest and build on that. And so after all this time that I've been doing this stuff, I just want to do what I think might make a difference. So.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, I mean, I can instantly see how kids would want to make their own stories and then put them inside of.
That's another big piece is they start embellishing because the stories are cool. So take it off. You know, there's another side road that you can take. You know,
Right.
you know, maybe over the mountains and the woods over there, there's other kind of numbers like decimals. You know?
Right.
What
And
are
then it
they?
sort of, yeah, exactly. And then it makes me think what Jeffrey was trying to get at too, and like in trying to reduce the number of tasks or subjects or that are separated and you know combined, you know, in the ways that we're always trying to look at interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary or anti-disciplinary,
Right.
and just really take this opportunity to get kids to work on something of meaning and value to them, and then you know from there I'm certain that we'll cover all the necessary
Absolutely.
outcomes. I'm not really
Absolutely.
worried. I'm
Yeah.
never really worried
And then,
about those
and then, and
outcomes.
then they don't mind. They actually don't mind doing that other stuff because they know it's something important to them. So that they'll want to learn it, even if it's
Hmm.
hard. And some of
Right.
this stuff is very hard. Math, you know, people say math is easy or whatever. That's nonsense. Math is very hard, especially at the higher ends. So, you know, just because we streamline the teaching and we put them in cooperative groups and we do all this kind of preaching and doing things. And there's a lot of people doing very good things. I'm not
Right.
complaining because there is a portion of the audience that is bought into it. They're
Right.
engaged, you know. But there's too large of a number that are lost and they don't have them. It's no meaningless for them. So
Right.
that's
Right.
the bunch that I'm after.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I get what you're saying, and I like and I think this is, you know, this gets to what we're the other thing yeah, some good stuff in the chat
Gary
happening.
Stagers, you
Yeah.
know, Dan
Um,
Meyer could be my grandkid. No, we don't get along all that well. You know, what's funny about me? I introduced Dan Meyer to NCTM. He was still a
really?
teacher and he couldn't afford to come to NCTM. And I had my group Climb had a booth. And I said, well, if you come and spend a little time in my booth, I'll give you a badge and then you could roam the grounds for nothing. He did that. So
Wow.
that was, you know, and then I look back and said, well, history was formed, you know, the Pied Piper of the mathematics world, Dan Meyer, is free roam now, you know. Great grandkid. Thanks, Gary.
Nice. You know, and then the other thing that I really like,
Yeah.
and you know, I think I think the weird number story wouldn't be as great if it weren't also presented in this animated format too.
Right.
Um, so you know, that's the other thing that I'd like to push on, and I'm sure Jeffrey, you probably have some thoughts here too, like the media lit stuff,
Oh
like
yeah.
getting kids into content creation, you know, and combining, you know, these narratives, that these storytelling ideas that maybe are, you know, grounded in some sort of science or math curriculum, but then also getting them to become producers and designers and creators of the actual media that then others can watch and learn from. Like that to me, like is like the ultimate. You know, that's a report card. That's a narrative. That's an assessment. Like, you know, none of this other stuff really means that much. But you know, making a video that took them 5 months to make it, they'll learn more from that than anything. And then figuring out how to share it with the world and you know whatever that turns into, maybe become, a small production house of their own. Like that to me is a much better use of our time.
It's the courage to put it out there as well. Like, I mean, I was thinking all sorts of things when Eeyore was doing this. And one of the things that came to mind was J.J. Abrams has a TED talk and he's talking about the mystery box, the idea that there should always be something that is unknown. And so, in your story about the fractions, there's something that they have to figure out, and you're not spoon feeding it to them. You're basically saying, look, here's something that we don't know. And really that mimics real life. It's like, where are we ever going to use this mathematics? You're going to use it to find out stuff you don't know. And so the pitfall that math teachers often fall into is that they try to give them just practical examples. Well, you're going to use spreadsheets because of this, right? It's like
when you're sitting in your cubicle. Yeah.
It's the point should be that that you're looking to incorporate this stuff into your own understanding. So the reason that storytelling is really important is because it helps to connect things from one to the other. So that when you're retelling the story of fractions or you're doing something, then when you tell a story, you find gaps that take you from the first step to the second step to the third step. So that if I tell you a joke, right? If I tell you a joke and I miss part of that joke, it's not going to make sense to you, right? So I have to have all those pieces together. So,
right.
Like my wife was saying, like, what do you want to do? Like, if you had to do this and you wanted to teach the perfect, you wanted to have the perfect year, and you had a kid. Let's say you have a child, and you know that school is going to be all messed up for the next couple of years. What would be a good way to do it? And I said, well, I would just take a master class. I would go and get one of those masterclass subscriptions where I could learn from Penn and Teller, and I could learn from Helen Mirren, and I could learn from anybody like this. And she said, but how would you measure that? And I said, well, then I would have to make those goals myself. So, I mean, that's what we want for the kids. The difficulty is going to be that that as wonderful as that fraction story is, and I've seen it before, as wonderful as it is, it doesn't hit everybody. So we have to have another arrow in our quiver, right? So we have to be able to go, okay, didn't work for you. Try, how about this? What if we, so it's all of those things. So storytelling is good. It's a great way to make a continuous connection, but not everybody is ready to read the story and remember the story and relate to the story at the same time. So we all know that there are novels that we read in high school because the kids aren't ready for the concepts earlier, and it's about the ability to make that connection because they're either not mature enough, they haven't had enough experience, all of those things. And the same thing with math, right? So not to pick on math, Eeyore, I love math.
Yeah,
math
no. I agree with you. I actually agree with you. On another note, I could talk about Abbott and Costello and that 13 times 7 equals 28.
Oh, love. Yes.
That's a magical one. That's a lovely one. But no, there's a place, like I said, there were kids when I was still teaching high school. Kids would say, do we have to do this stuff? Because I'm way ahead of you. I'm in chapters. Student telling me that I'm just too slow and I'm not doing things. And I said, fine, yeah, go ahead, do chapter 9. I don't care. Show me what you did. That's the secret. It's not to make it like a confrontation, make it, sure, I'm big enough to let you work ahead of me. So,
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, gosh, it's 2:00 already. And Alice, she came and went. Maybe she'll come back next week and talk a little bit because she's our new guest this time. And we didn't get to everybody's piece. Daniel posted something, I posted something, Gary shared something. But why don't we try not to do too much at once? I mean, reading 3 pieces and discussing them, I think is pretty good for an hour. I think we've got Gary's
Sorry,
on
Gary,
fire in the
it's-
chat today.
Yeah, I know. Keep my eyes off it. So I'm not.
Yeah, and I will post everything. I'll make a new, I'll gather everything that's shared today. And Susan, you let me know when
Right.
you want to share yours, when you're ready to go public. You just tell me, because I don't want to post before you're ready. So, all right. Well, then, unless anyone has any important final words, maybe we'll stop for now, and then we'll come back to the remaining pieces that we didn't read and see if we can pick up any from other people who didn't show up in today's meeting. Any final words? Any good jokes? Want to end with a joke?
Don't start with Gary.
No, nothing. It's okay. How about that? That's your homework. Prepare a good joke for next time.
There you go.
Everyone, prepare a good joke.
Ad lib is the best.
All right. All right,
Bye-bye.
people. Great to see you all.
Take care.
I'll see you out there.
See you in the funny papers.
Yeah.